Hi, ladies. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to start on time tonight, which is a new thing we're trying out, so that we're respectful of yours and, of course, Vera's time. But Vera, thank you so much for joining us. We all mostly have read your book. If you haven't read her book, then we're going to alert you to when we're going to have spoilers in case you haven't finished, because I was telling Vera that this is a week earlier than normal. So I know that some of you sent in your questions in advance because you didn't want to attend in case we ruined the ending for you. So I appreciate. Oh, see, there you go, Ariana. I'm not done yet. All right, well, we'll keep that in mind when we're asking questions. So thank you so much for taking the time out to meet with us. We got a record number of questions by email, so I'm just going to kick off and
sure.
And
yeah, well, thank you for having me, first of all.
And absolutely, thank you for being here. Well, so the first question is really just to introduce yourself. I'll read your biography, and then maybe you can just expand a little bit on it if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so Vera is a writer and scientist based in Washington, D.C. Her debut novel, Never Saw Me Coming, was published by Park Row Books and Harvey Seckle Vintage in September 2021, so very recently. Her short fiction has been published in magazines such as Glimmer, Train, Day One, and The Pinch. She was born and raised in the Mid-Atlantic region. Before stints in New York and LA returned her to her rightful home of D.C., where she's lived for most of her adult life. She has a PhD in social psychology, where she studied intergroup relations, ideology, and quantitative methods. She blogs irregularly about writing, horror movies, and pop culture, terrible TV, and she enjoys existentialism and puppies.
I guess I would say in addition to that, gosh, I don't know what else. It was a pretty thorough bio. This is the fourth book I've written as an adult. And I had kind of had a long road to publication before that, and kind of an interesting publication story if anyone wants to hear it. I'm working on my next book, and just kind of the launch coming out was very exciting and stressful. And now I'm like kind of happy to go back to regular life, like the pace of regular life. I like doing events, but not like 3 a day.
Fair enough. So what read you into writing? How about we start there?
Honestly, it was probably a combination of like I was bored in school a lot in grade school, and I didn't have a ton of friends. So it was just kind of like, how can I entertain myself? And my sister got me into reading, so I like read a lot. I like started reading adult books at probably an inappropriate age. And then when I was in high school, I was, of course, writing a vampire novel, as one does. And then I started taking fiction classes in college, like literary. I was writing like literary short stories. And then I stopped writing when I went to grad school because I didn't have time. And then in 2013, I got back into it and started writing first short stories. And then I started writing novels. And this is the fourth one that I wrote.
Okay, so we do want to hear your publication story, because I know that a lot of our audience are would-be writers. So we absolutely want to hear that. But before that, so do you write full time now, or are you're a psychologist?
Yeah, so I do like consulting and stuff, but no, I don't want to write full time because I think, I had, when things slowed down during the pandemic, I had more time to just do nothing, and I didn't do anything. So I think that I kind of excel when there's a lot of things going on, and I feel like working enriches my life in terms of the things I think about and learning new information. And as much as I love writing, like it's not using the same part of my brain as like doing statistics or something. So so far, I have not planned on writing full time.
Okay, that's so interesting. Ladies, if you do have questions for Vera, please feel free to use the chat window, or you're absolutely welcome to ask them live. Of course, there is a raise your hand button. So please feel free to do that. That's always fun. My next question that I got by email actually is, you have a PhD in social psychology, but how much did that influence you to write this book specifically? And did it include the study of psychopaths, your own study?
No, yeah, I studied like American electoral politics and like intergroup relations, racism in America. So I mean, I didn't study anything having to do with psychopathy, which is clinical psychology. I don't think I would have written this book if I didn't have that background, because I have the background of like working in a psychology department and what it's like when there's like, you know, the principal investigator, professor, and then the graduate student under them, and then the RAs, and like that kind of structure. And the all of the little experiments that are mentioned in the book are classical experiments in social psychology. So like the thing with the M&Ms, the thing with the like people on the train track, all of those things are like very famous um, studies that you can look up. So like there's a lot of like tidbits about psychology in that are real. And then because of my background, I was able to read like real studies about psychopathy that are in like textbooks intended for scientists, not for like the general audience of readers. So you know, I've written about a variety of different things. This is the first book I've written that kind of directly touches on psychology, though.
Um, one of our we have a DC chapter. I don't know if you know that or not, but
Mhm.
yeah. So they're a very popular chapter, and we got a lot of comments from them about how they loved reading about it because they know the landscape.
Yeah.
So Jennifer actually just asks here, how important was it to set the story in DC for you? Is it because it's a familiar city for you?
It was, you know, why I wanted to do it is that I've read there's not a lot of things that take place in DC that are not about politics. And like actual human beings live in DC who aren't the president or, you know, and I also feel like I've lived in major cities like DC, New York, and LA, where I've read books where the cities were described as entirely white when they're not. So I kind of wanted to show DC for like this is what it's like, and then to you can kind of feel that you're there. And I wanted to kind of shout out like local businesses and stuff. So there's like little goodies for people who recognize the places.
Yeah, that's cool. And obviously it's much easier to write about a place you know than
Yes.
than having to learn about a new one. Um, so you talked a little bit about the actual tests that are done in the specific type of psychology, but how much research did it require, and how did you do the research into sort of like the mental capacities of these characters?
I read a couple like pop psychology books, like John Ronson's Psychopath Test, and like there's another like memoir of a psychopath. And but mostly I read the Handbook of Psychopathy, which is a large collection of studies by people in the field who study psychopaths. And I read through a lot of that. And I read some like random articles that were like online. And then the most important thing was to, just because a set of people have a diagnosis doesn't mean they're all the same. Like they still have individual personalities. So it was really important to me that every psychopath in the book is completely different. They have different perspectives on what it means to be a psychopath. Like Chloe clearly doesn't think there's anything wrong with her. If anything, she thinks she's better. Another character kind of wants to change and be a better person. So I wanted them all to feel like different and like three-dimensional people in as much as I could.
I thought it was interesting, and I got to remember not to ruin anything here, but I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting how, because when you hear psychopath, I think most people, maybe I'm wrong, but like you think murder,
Mhm.
and you think like they want to kill people, but it was almost like it's my first experience ever reading about like sort of this I don't even know what to call it, but obviously this mental, what would it be? The way that a person is
Yeah.
without and realizing that it doesn't necessarily like it's something that you're born with and they have to manage.
Yeah, I think that people use the word colloquially to just like talk about any terrible person. And like, for example, a lot of people assume that serial killers are all psychopaths, but there's a really interesting study in that handbook that where they did a like an in-depth case study of like 10 well-known serial killers and concluded that only one of them was actually a psychopath, Ted Bundy.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think like looking at the actual criteria of what it is, you can imagine someone just like in everyday life. Robert Hare, one of the main researchers in the area, talks about how a lot of these people are just people that like work in corporate America or whatever. I mean, they think it's between I think 1 to 3% of the American population, and they're not all incredibly deviant people. I mean, you might know a psychopath in your life.
Oh, wow. Puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Ladies, for anybody who just joined, if you do have a question, feel free to use the chat window, and you can also use the raise your hand functionality if you'd like to ask it live. We're always welcome that. Let's see here. Here is another good question. So did you have more fun writing one character over another? Is Chloe your favorite character?
She's the most fun to write, I think, because she's funny. And I think, when I originally had the conception for the book, I didn't intend for her to be funny. It's just that she was kind of like shallow and judgmental, and then she'd say these funny things. And I'm like, okay, I'll just have her be funny. But she also uses like a peculiar diction. Like when the diction that she uses is just different. So it's really kind of fun to get into her mindset and how she would respond to like a normal stimuli in a different way than someone else. There's a lot of like little things where like she's trying to do something on her computer, but she's eating a Snickers bar that she's stolen from her roommate, like, because that's just like her day-to-day life.
My favorite character was actually Andre, and because and I'm sorry, I'm trying to reword all my questions so that I don't.
So I don't think that's a spoiler.
Okay.
About Andre.
Okay.
Okay, that's chapter 2. I mean, I think you can say that.
Okay, fair enough. So Andre isn't actually a psychopath, but he worms his way out. So like, how easy would that have been to do? Like that felt sort of like, I'm like, wow, you must be really smart to be able to get away with that.
Yeah, well, you'd have to do the interviews, but a lot of it is self-report. So there's a very famous study from like a long time ago about these scientists who faked schizophrenia symptoms, and they ended up in an asylum and they couldn't get out because they were like, no, we're actually scientists, we just pretended. And then the administrators were like, paranoid delusions, and like, no, actually they were normal. So I don't think it would be that hard. I think the harder part would be like if they were to do something like an MRI study on him, would his brain be different, like that type of thing. And there's also, it's kind of hinted at, but like Andre, when he's younger, gets diagnosed with conduct disorder. And I didn't say this directly, but like he should have never been diagnosed with that. There is kind of consistent issues with people of color being misdiagnosed with things like that they actually don't have. Something terrible happened to him, he was reacting to it, he was young. So I mean, I was kind of trying to play on those issues.
Yeah, I really liked him as a character. Joe.
A fish out of water.
Joe is going to ask her question live.
Sure.
When this happens.
Unmute myself.
Hi. Yes.
Hi, I loved the novel, and
thank you.
I'm hoping it's going to get 5s all around the table when we meet next week in person. Yay. But my question is, at the outset, did you know who the killer was, or did this change and flip as you were writing it and developing the characters, and you're going, no, this, because I was totally guessing through the whole novel.
Yeah, so if you look on my website, there's a picture of a Facebook post I made in 2017. That's something like, hey guys, I got an idea for a book that's about 7 psychopaths, and then there's a picture of that. And what I didn't put another picture, it was a few comments down, I wrote, and the person who did it is, so I knew the beginning and the end. And so then I wouldn't write a mystery without plotting out the whole thing, because I think it's too hard and you have to seed clues. And there's certainly a lot of red herrings. But I did know the whole time, and that never changed. Actually, some other stuff changed, but the culprit or culprits never changed.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so before we delve into anything about getting published, or we have some other questions that are not as specific to the actual character or plot, I have a very, very, very specific question for you.
Okay.
So as a book club, the entire book club, we read a book called Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I don't know if you're familiar with it or if you've read it.
That's the Brock Turner.
Yes.
Yes.
But for those of us who have read both books, our members may recall that the part of the book where Chloe talks about the abuse that she's faced and how she doesn't want to report it. She wants to get even instead. And you delve into very briefly into victim shaming. And it really touched a chord with me because it is so succinctly describes exactly the experience that Chanel went through when she did have to report a sexual assault. So I wanted to know, was it your intention on your part to open this topic up and air that truth a little bit?
Yeah, I will say I actually haven't read that book, but absolutely was thinking about a Brock Turner like character in my mind. And thinking about that if this did go to court or whatever, that Will would have parents who are like, no, he's a good boy. And what that would be like. And what I was thinking a lot about at the time, I was actually doing a major revision of this book during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, where I just think women were expressing a lot of like rage and impotence. And that rage comes from being in a position where no one is hearing you or seeing you and you're screaming. So I think that she is kind of practically thinking about these things and is like, the only way that I can undo this is to do this thing. And I knew that it was doing a kind of like twisted thing where most of us think that murder is wrong, but a lot of people feel extremely compelled by her desire to do it, and see the revenge in the book that we often don't get to see in real life.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so yeah, let's go to your experience of getting published and writing and sort of that journey. What has that been like?
Yeah, so this was the third book that I queried, which is querying is when you're trying to get an agent, you like cold send them a letter about the book. And it was a really harrowing experience for the first two books because I did not get an agent. And then when I wrote this book, it was so viral when I wrote it that I said, if I can't get an agent for this, there is no book I can write that I will get an agent for. So I did get an agent, my wonderful agent, Rebecca. And we were working on revisions. And then I finished the final draft of the book the first week of March 2020. And we said, well, this COVID thing like might be bad. Maybe we should like wait to go on submission. And I was so scared. I was like, I felt selfish for thinking that my opportunity was possibly being taken away from me. But we waited a few months till the end of May and went on submission, and the book sold in like 2 days at auction, which is insane. It sold for a high amount, which is like every writer's dream. And I was trapped in my 600 square foot apartment. I had not seen my friends physically in months because I was too scared. And I just called them, we have to get together, and see each other and drink a lot of champagne, which we did. But the entire process of putting the book together was done during the pandemic virtually. Like all of the editing, all of the meetings with marketing and what have you was all done virtually. And they did a fantastic job. And I didn't get to meet my agent, my editor in person until July, like before Delta, during that brief period of time. So it's been really surreal because it all happened during COVID. But for a lot of 2020, this was like the only thing like keeping me like having anything to look forward to was the book coming out.
I had a child during COVID, so I feel like maybe you have the same sort of process, right?
Oh
like
God.
You birthed this book.
Yeah. And then you're like, this is here?
Yeah, exactly. One question I have is your agent. I want to know how much of a role, like, so you did revisions with your agent before you tried to sell the book. How much did the book change from when it was revised with your agent to when it was revised by the editor?
I think my agent kind of had like, one kind of structural thing. and then wanted me to make the stakes clearer for Andre. So it wasn't, she's not like a line editor. So that wasn't like a huge revision. That was like a 10% revision. And then the revision that I did with my editor, Laura, was more significant. So that's kind of what I kind of expected, because I knew beforehand what kind of edits Rebecca wanted. I don't think either of the edits was like a huge rewrite, like an 80% rewrite, but maybe closer to like 10 to 30.
Yeah, well, that's what you want to. You don't want to be told you need to rewrite half your book.
Yeah.
Randy has a question. He was curious, what was the most surprising thing you've learned about the publishing process, the best or the worst?
Okay, I'll say the best and the worst. The best thing is that like I didn't know the extent to which there's like a whole back end machinery to get a book out, like they get it out early to independent booksellers, they get it out to librarians. I had no idea how important librarians were, who've been, both categories of people have been incredible for promoting this book. So I had no idea about that whole like machinery. The bad is, didn't realize that people would tag you in negative reviews. Like, I don't know why you would do that. Just like, what matters, people? Come on.
Since you brought it up, I love to ask authors this. How important are reviews? Do you read them? Do you ignore them? What's your feeling?
So at first I was reading every single review on Goodreads, and then I realized I was going to make myself crazy. And then I realized, like, probably around my launch time, like, you don't care what everyone's opinion is of you. You only care about like what cool people think of you. So the trade reviews mattered to me a lot. Like the New York Times mattered a lot. And then other writers who I respect, like I care about their opinion. But now I don't read reviews like on Goodreads at all, or like Amazon or whatever, but like I'll read like a trade review.
It's probably the saner choice.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually my next question is from one of our members out in Denver, actually, Ariana. She wanted to know, what has your COVID book release experience been like? And you covered the writing, but what about like releasing during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, so we did a lot of online events, which was pretty easy. Like I'm actually not really, I'm wearing like yoga pants. So it's very easy to like pop in and do 3 in one day as opposed to doing them in person. You are kind of robbed of the, like, I was supposed to have my launch in person at Politics and Prose, which is like my favorite bookstore in DC, and it got moved to online. So that was kind of disappointing. Who I don't even know what sales would have been like if it weren't for the pandemic, because you're also hear that people are reading more. So like I don't know. And I'm also having trouble remembering what life was like before COVID, to be honest. But you know, even though I didn't have an in-person launch, I had like 20 of my closest friends come over, and that was like great. I mean, it was still, it's really stressful to have a book come out. I don't think people realize that there's all kinds of crazy emotions involved. But so, I mean, I think it went out as well as it can, for like, because after a year of pandemic, I think book people figured more things out than people who had books coming out in like April of 2020.
Fair enough. And hopefully your next book will be a different experience altogether.
Oh, if we're still in the pandemic 2 years from now, I hope not.
Beryl wants to know if you had a say in choosing the narrator for the audiobook. She listened to it, and who I listened was very exciting and gave all the feelings. It felt like alive sometimes.
Yeah, I did. I got to pick from 5. And actually, I went and listened to books by all of the like top 3 choices. And Brittany Presley is the narrator. I thought she did a fantastic job. I was listening to it last month. There were parts where I laughed out loud. She does the like Chloe pretending to be innocent voice, and then slips back into her like narration and her like real voice. I thought she did a really good job. It's a great audiobook. If you haven't heard it, you should.
It's such a different experience listening to the audiobook versus like reading digitally or reading the physical book. And I always feel like I missed out on something when I don't listen to the audiobook because everybody's always talking about them.
I have to say, like, listening to the sex scene in your own audiobook makes you want to die.
Were you with your mother at the same time listening to it? Because I feel like that would be more.
I wanted to fast forward.
Definitely. Well, Beryl said it was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people, Ariana says she's reading along to the audio, which I've never experienced either, but
I've never done that. Huh.
All right. So my next question for you, which I just had on the tip of my mind and now I can't remember what it was. The sex scene just threw me. So, okay, let's talk about you as a reader a little bit. What do you read? What is your favorite genre and what are your authors and what book should we be reading in your opinion?
Oh, so I probably read 70% literary, 30% mystery with a little bit of horror. I mean, probably my favorite books are, I mean, I love the Elena Ferrante, the Neapolitan Quad. It's, if you haven't read it, you should read it. It's amazing.
Sorry,
even
what
in
was that? Say that
translation.
again.
My Brilliant Friend is the first book. It's a series of 4 books. She's an anonymous Italian author, and like no one knows who she is, ostensibly. And it's about these 2 girls that are friends, and one is poor and one is poorer, and just like their life in Naples. And it's just so good. It's so good. Those are among my favorites. I'm currently reading, I think it's called The Savage Kind. It just came out. And that is about 1940s era. Yes, 1940s DC, these 2 girls. And it's he calls it the origin story of a femme fatale. So that immediately, like, I love that blurb to get me to read the book. And I just got an autographed copy of Cloud, Cuckoo Land, the new Anthony, is it Doer?
Is it Anthony Doerr?
Yeah, is that how you say it? Doer? Okay.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is. That's like,
the-
it sounds kind of like Cloud Atlas, and that's one of my favorite books. So yeah, that's kind of like my current night shelf is those 3.
Did you read a lot of psychological there's a lot of psychological thrillers sort of like when you were writing it?
Yeah, I think I had a long like 10-year period, like probably from Gillian Flynn's first book through, recently. And like my Gone Girl is clearly like one of my favorites, if you can't tell. I really like Peter Swanson too. I think he's like unusually clever. He always has characters that suddenly surprise you. Like you think you know the plot and then they'll do something weird. So I do read a lot of those. Sometimes I get burned out on them because it's like a lot of, a woman thinking about something, a clue, like that kind of thing. So that's why I do like to switch a lot with literary fiction.
And sort of staying in the same genre, is there any like Netflix shows that, well, I mean, they don't have to be psychological thrillers, but
yeah,
I mean, there's so many psychological thrillers sort of like series out there. Are there any of those that you watched or recommend?
I just binged all of You in like season 3 in like 2 days. And Squid Games, that's kind of my genre of like, I guess, horror. I actually am a huge horror movie fan. I will watch like any horror movie. And so I watch like almost any horror movie that's on, I can get access to. And then Midnight Mass on Netflix, which I'm like refusing to finish because I like it so much and I don't want it to end. I think it was a really thoughtful meditation of like clearly someone who had their own kind of thoughts and feelings about their faith, and then transporting that into the horror genre. I just thought it was so intelligent, and I still don't want to finish
it. I can relate to that. I don't watch horror movies at all though. Being so multifaceted and having so many interests, do you think that, well, you can tell us, I suppose, your next book, will it be a psychological thriller or will you sort of like veer in another lane?
No, it's more of a mystery with like maybe supernatural elements. I mean, I can tell you a little about what it's about if you
Yeah,
want to know.
please do.
Yeah, it's about it's kind of an homage to Stephen King's It, although it's not a horror novel. It's about a group of kids who are 15 in 1995, which is when I was 15. And they witness a mass murder, and then are trying to solve this mystery. And in the process, they end up killing a powerful man in town. And then 20 years later, they have to come back from all different places to this hometown because that man that they killed is apparently still alive. They're trying to figure out how did that happen. So it's a dual timeline.
Oh, I love dual timelines. That sounds really interesting. And when can we look for that?
Not for a while. It's gonna take me a while.
Fair enough. I don't know if anybody else got this feeling, but I felt like your book sort of lends itself very well to television. Is there any interest there to see it on the big screen?
Well, we got approached by a few producers before we even like had the formal contract for the book. They'd heard about it somehow. So the film TV rights sold, I think, in July of last year. They preempted us pretty aggressively. The preempting is like when someone really wants something, so they like come at it first. So there, we did this in the worst part of COVID, pre-Delta. So it was like, is Hollywood even going to exist a year from now? And I was like, okay, take the option money. Under, you never know if it's going to get made, but I think all of these platforms are so hungry for IP. And I talked to the production people, and they were interested in it being like a show more so than a movie,
Right.
Which I agree with. I think it lends itself really well to something like that. So fingers crossed. I don't know. I hope so, but.
Well, that I'm sure we would all be very interested in seeing that. And we have seen, and because the book club's been going for a long time, so we certainly have seen books and talked to the author, and we've had this exact conversation, and then like 2 years later, there it is on Netflix.
Yeah,
So
you're like, I knew her before she was cool.
Yeah, exactly. We can't get her on Zoom anymore, but we had her once. We actually had Cheryl Strayed once at a meeting in person, so there you go. It was before she was Cheryl Strayed, the one you can't talk to anymore.
I will still talk to you.
Oh, thank you. You'll remember us. Oh yeah, Joe, that's such a typical question. And so I find like it's such a hard question, but she wants to know who you would want to play the characters. Who would play Chloe at the very least?
Okay, so I don't know anyone young enough because like I don't know young people because I'm too old, but I think like, is her name, if Anna Taylor-Joy was 18, is she the girl from the chess show?
Oh, I love that show.
Yeah, I think she would be good. I think the only thing is like whoever plays Andre, I would love it if they were like had dimples or they're really cute. And you're like, oh, what is this like young boy doing here? Yeah, and then just so you know, Dr. Wyman, I always pictured as what is his name? The dad from Empty Nest. I don't know the actor's name, but you can look him up. Richard Mulligan. He is no longer with us, so he cannot play the role. But that's how I pictured him.
Fair enough. And we're going to wrap up now. So if anybody has any last questions, please put them in the chat window now. My last question is about a sequel. Are we going to is there a future for any of these characters?
Yeah, so everyone keeps asking me that. So my next book is not a sequel. I do have other ideas. If there is a TV show, there's certainly an incentive to write more because there could be multiple seasons. So, I mean, I do have ideas floating in my head. It's definitely not outside the realm of possibility.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, we will look forward to that. Thank you so much for your time and for your great answers. And thank you everybody for joining us.
Yes. Thank you for coming.
And we'll get this up on our website very soon.
Great.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Have a good night.
Bye.